Welcome back. We are joined again by Larry Johnson, a former CI analyst, to discuss what appears to be war coming sooner rather than later to Iran. At least the world has its eyes now on Iran, given that the United States continues to mobilize more and more military assets to the region. Um, how should we read this? Is this preparation to war, or is this just the U.S. building up, well, some show of strength during negotiations?
Well, I was hoping it was simply an intimidation gesture, but what I'm hearing from friends that are still involved with national security matters, this is far more serious. They've described it as um, it's one of two things. This is either going to be a reprise of Midnight Hammer, when the United States launched B-2 raids into northern Iran. Of course, that was done in, let's call it collaboration or coordination with Iran, or they're preparing for an Israeli attack and to be able to come back up Israel. One of two things. It didn't say it was just this was to try to force Iran to make concessions at the negotiating table. The other, sort of, I see it as a warning indicator. There's a former Undersecretary of Defense, a gentleman named Stephen Bryan, and I know Stevens. I like him. I consider him a friend. We're acquaintances via email and Zoom calls. But he's a Zionist, and I'm not using that as a pejorative. I mean, that's his view. Believes that God gave that land to Israel, and they have a right to occupy it. However, he is very moderate. He's not a Ben Gvir crazy or a Smotrich crazy. Uh, and he writes good, solid analysis. Well, he put out a piece 2 days ago reacting to the uh, recent negotiations between the United States and Iran. It was very emotional. I mean, just tearing Witkoff apart and describing that Iran is using a rope-a-dope strategy, referencing Muhammad Ali, the technique of allowing a puncher to punch out, until they would exhaust themselves, and then they could strike back. Uh, so when I'm seeing someone like Steve get that emotional, that there is enormous pressure now coming down on Trump to to attack Iran. And the issue now is, they moved on from nuclear weapons. It is ballistic missiles and support for Hamas and Hezbollah, which is just, particularly the latter, support for Hamas and Hezbollah, complete red herring. The rhetoric and claims by Israel don't match the facts. And I saw your recent debate with his fellow Joel Rosenberg. Thought you did an excellent job. But again, he continued to put out the lies that massive terrorist attacks by Hamas and Hezbollah. And if you just, I challenge anybody, go do the research. There are plenty of AI search engines out there. Just ask the questions. How many Israelis have been killed by Iranian proxy groups since 1982? Because that's when Hezbollah came into existence. And the answer is fewer than 5,000. And you match that up against the 70,000 plus Palestinians that have been murdered by the Israelis during the course of the last 2 years and 3 months. So it just doesn't add up. So Trump is under great pressure now to attack. And I think that's one of the reasons Bibi Netanyahu's coming to town, not just to press Trump to do it, but also to coordinate. I think it's highly likely we could see violence in the next 2 weeks. I hope I'm wrong. I'd love to be wrong.
Yeah, I thought that debate was interesting because it's so dishonest. But you see this always with the arguments, because they say, well, look at this government. They treat their population so horribly, and the whole pitch is quite manipulative. But then when you ask, well, what do you tend to achieve with a military strike like this? because if you look at all your previous military adventurism over the past 20, 30 years, which one has ever led to success? And then, well, we didn't stabilize any government, but
Yeah.
we created chaos, divisions to make sure that it would be weak enough not to threaten Israel. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say on one hand that the key objective is to create chaos and instability and hardship for people. At the same time, you're doing it because you want to help them. So it's all. I just, if that's your goal, you think that every country in the entire region have to be divided, destroyed, and in chaos in order for Israel to security. Make that argument. I just find it very dishonest that they have to pretend they're humanitarians, like caring about protests while they're actually doing everything you can to destabilize the economy, pumping weapons in, fueling violence. I mean, it's again, at least if you say we want to destroy the Iran, at least you have honesty, but there's not even that. But if we go with the first hypothesis here, though, that the objective is simply, I do not believe that's the case, but the objective is to simply put a lot of pressure on Iran in the negotiations. What actually can be achieved now with the negotiations? Because it appears that the US has wedded itself to this idea that you don't just get the nuclear deal, but it has to be tied to Iran abandoning all allies, Iran giving up its conventional weapons, that is its ballistic missiles, that's its entire deterrence, and just, bet its entire future, its existence on the hope that Israel and the United States won't take advantage of its weakness.
Yeah, well, they've if Iran hasn't learned that lesson yet, they're going to be in bigger trouble. But I think they have. They've got 18 different types of ballistic missiles, both old and very modern. They just tested an intercontinental ballistic missile, reportedly successfully tested it. They've got 5 different types of cruise missiles. They've got in excess of 15 types of drones. So Iran has been preparing over the last, they finally came to the realization as a result of the events of the last 46 years since the arrival of the Ayatollah Khomeini and the establishment of the Islamic Republic back in, February of February 1979, that they're at war with the United States. The United States has repeatedly attacked Iran, not the other way around. The United States is very fond of creating this narrative that it's, here we are, we're just minding our own business, looking around, and these nasty Iranians come up and attack us out of the blue. And, they cite, look, what Iran was behind the bombing of the Marines, we call it the Marine Barracks in Beirut, Lebanon in October 1983. Well, what happened in September of 1983? Oh, yeah, that'd be right. U.S. battleships, when we still had those deployed, were shelling Shia neighborhoods and villages in the Bekaa Valley, killing Shia women and children. So, when we kill a bunch of civilians and then their relatives or the friends retaliate, we act surprised. From the early outset in 1980, even before Hezbollah existed, the United States is encouraging Saddam Hussein to invade Iran, and we then supply Saddam Hussein with precursor chemicals used to produce mustard gas, which, when all is said and done, when that war was over, at least 500,000 Iranians were dead as a consequence of that war. So, if you killed 500,000 of my relatives and countrymen and friends, and I was chanting death to Glenn Deason, at least you'd understand why. You killed 500,000 of my people. And again, here's the United States, a complete disconnect. We don't seem to understand that. So Iran now they're almost naive in some aspects. If you go back to October of 2024, when they launched a demonstration attack, they were wanting to show Israel what they could do with drones and missiles, hoping that that would persuade the Israelis to back off. It had the opposite effect. They just assumed, oh, Iran's weak. They took Iranian patience for weakness. And the same happened in June, the 12-day war. It continued to lie to the public about the claim that Iran really inflicted no damage at all on Israel, when the exact opposite was the case. So now Iran's come to the place that they have drawn a line in the sand. They have been a victim again of an act of war by the West, admitted act of war by Scott Bessent, that we attacked your economy to inflict maximum economic damage on you and your people. And happy about it. Look at what we did. So now Iran is going to be fully justified, and they're prepared to defend themselves. They're not going to throw the first punch, but if attacked, they will then retaliate on a massive scale. And I don't think, and they're not going to stop until there is a negotiated settlement to the war that will include lifting of economic sanctions on Iran. That's where I think this is ultimately headed, because this time Iran's got the backing of China and Russia. There are reports that China has provided an advanced 3D radar, one that allows it to determine specific locations, specific height, and direction of travel. If they can use that to identify inbound threats. They've got air defense systems supplied by both Russia and China. And right now there are Chinese and Russian warships headed to the Arabian Sea, where they are scheduled towards the middle of February or the 1st of March to conduct a joint naval military exercise, which this will be the 8th iteration of it. They started it in 2019. So it's a far different tactical situation right now than what confronted Iran in the surprise attack of June 13th, 2025.
It's very strange to me that the solution every time becomes war. This is not just something that applies to Iran, but it's whether it's Russia or any adversary. I mean, usually when you have any conflict with a large or a great power, well, even large in this case, usually people look for areas, well, where the key strategic security interests can be harmonized. So where could the US respect Iranian? What does Iran have to respect from the US or Israel? And if there's areas it can't be harmonized, then look for ways to manage the competition. If none of this is possible, then of course war is an option. That's why I often like talking to people from the intelligence community. At least they have the maturity to sit down with the other side, to appreciate their politics, their traditions, cultures, all of this. Exactly because you don't hate opponents. You have to be able to chart out the possibility of how far diplomacy can go before you go down the path of war. The problem, I think, is the drooling idiots, which are our politicians, our journalists. It's just the hatred and the contempt for the other side. It's so blinding that as you said now with Iran, the assumption that they're just these bad guys always coming to get us, and anyone who disagrees with that, they're either naive or they're just in their pockets of the Ayatollahs. This kind of extremist radical thinking, it's really very destructive. I don't know where it's coming from, though, within the West. If it's just something left over from hegemony that all adversaries have to be vilified, never understood. It's very strange. We didn't used to be like this. We used to be able to sit down and appreciate the other side. Again, not hating adversaries. But sorry.
No, I was just going to say it's a combination of two things. The Zionist lobby, starting from the early 70s, has been very, so 50 years of propaganda to persuade the United States that Iran in particular is the biggest Islamic threat. And what I find fascinating, and I saw this firsthand because right after 9/11, I'd been working with the U.S. Military Special Operations Command and Joint JSOC, SOCOM. And the level of ignorance about Sunni Islam vice Shia Islam was incredible. They had no, one Muslim, same as another Muslim. And then when you tried to explain that, particularly in Iran's case, Iran had been repeatedly attacked by these Muslim extremists that that are Sunni. They're based in the Wahhabi sect out of Pakistan. They're known as the Deobandis. But for many years, Iran was fighting those very Islamic extremists that we in the United States claim attacked us on 9/11. So right off the bat, that should have made us a natural ally of Iran. But then we got this deep, dark undercurrent where the CIA had been funding and enabling many of these radical Sunni groups during the war in Afghanistan against the Soviets, and had developed relationships and contacts, and then continued to use them. And to the point that we deployed them in the Second Chechen War against Russia. And we saw it recently with al-Jilani. I mean, bona fide, come out of Al-Qaeda, part of ISIS, then from ISIS to al-Nusra, and then from al-Nusra, he sets up his own organization. And he's getting hugs in the White House, in the Oval Office, for God's sake. So, we create this simple narrative about Muslim bad, U.S. good. And then we put, Iran into the bad category without actually understanding how they have been fighting against the very Islamic extremism that we claim that we oppose. And yet, through my old organization, fund and enable those very extremists. I mean, it's just, that's where you step back and realize the world's not as we're told that it is.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that could have been done after the September 11 attacks. People often forget that the first, I think, foreign leader to call Bush was President Putin, and essentially saying, "Well, we can cooperate with you. Let's build a partnership on this." And that was a genuine idea, that as long as all relations between the U.S. and Russia were focused on the redivision of Europe through NATO expansion, everything will always be zero sum. But they thought we also have problem with this fundamentalist. So maybe this can be an opportunity to essentially overcome the legacy of the Cold War and become profound partners. That was not taken. And as you said, the same with Iran. They actually fought against the same people. The Iranians also approached the United States, nothing. Instead, we forward, what is now 25 years, and instead we, not just the United States, but the political West, allied itself with Al-Qaeda in Syria. I mean, you couldn't make it up. What are we doing here? The paths not taken are just quite extraordinary. But on this path to war now against Iran, as that seems to be, well, that's where we're heading. What weapons have the U.S. assembled? Do you have any clear overview in terms of, because it doesn't look like this is just going for another 10-day war, that they need an incredible amount of not just air defenses, but also offensive capabilities if they're going to go after a massive adversary like Iran.
I'm told that we've deployed a very large number of F-35 fighter bombers to the region. Now, you have the F-35C that operates off of the aircraft carrier, but in addition to that, you have other F-35s that are land-based, that are not going off of carriers. And those are used to try to what's called SEAD, S-E-A-D, suppression of enemy air defense. we're ever going to talk military stuff, you got to use acronyms because that's all they use. But the SEAD mission is such. I did get a message from one of my readers that who is in Yerevan, Armenia, and said that there is a huge U.S. presence, huge buildup of U.S. C-17s and other aircraft there. Didn't mention if any personnel had disembarked. So the United States is moving forces into the region, but they're doing so on the assumption that Iran's not going to be able to detect, much less stop, these aircraft. The F-35 is known as a stealth plane. The problem is the Chinese reportedly have deployed a radar that is specifically designed to detect stealth aircraft. So this thing is wading into very, very dangerous waters, because it's not just Iran that's stood up and say, okay, we're going to fight back. During the 12-day war, they could have bombed all of the U.S. bases. There are at least 10 to 12 different bases scattered from Qatar up to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, into Iraq, Syria. But they didn't touch them until the very end, where Trump got the bomb and, quote, obliterate Fordo, and then Iran struck a radar station at Al Udeid Air Force Base in Qatar. Then it was over. That's not going to be the case this time. You've already had the Shia throughout the region, particularly in Iraq, rise up and declare that they will go on a full attack against U.S. interests, U.S. personnel. So this could rapidly get out of control. And the ability, I believe, Iran has the ability to inflict such devastation on Israel. They'll stay away from Jerusalem, but they will destroy Haifa and Tel Aviv, and in a way that Israel has never. Israel got hit last time in a way it never been hit before. This time will be much, much worse, and the reliance upon THAAD or Patriot or Golden Dome or Iron Dome, they won't work. Iran's got too many missiles to overwhelm and deplete the air defense systems first and foremost, but they also have missiles capable of traveling at hypersonic speeds and being maneuvered, which makes it impossible for them to be shot down by those three systems.
Yeah, I don't like it when there's too much unpredictability at stake here, but this is what I mean. The United States doesn't know exactly what Iran has. All they know is that the Israelis are warning them that Iran is being able to replenish most of the things they either fired off or lost during the last war. But if we add to this, I think the Russians, as you said, and the Chinese know that this war will not be a short one like the other. It will be much more brutal and prolonged. So I think that they will also find ways of assisting, even if it's just offering intelligence, some radars which can detect better than the Israelis. I mean, in any way they can help with weapons, short of course, engaging any direct shooting war with the United States.
Yeah.
But with all this unpredictability, it's still very strange that the U.S. is willing to go forth with this. I mean, there's been war games in the past which haven't turned out very well. So the decision to still go forth with this, I mean, this is the only almost source of optimism I have, that it seems too crazy to actually that they actually will go through with this. But
Yeah.
what is? Yeah.
Well, no, I was just going to say that. So, unlike what happened on June 13th, 2025, that 12-day war, and then this latest attempt at sparking a color revolution that started on December 28th and lasted until roughly January 10th, there were primarily Mossad intelligence assets on the ground in Iran. They played a critical role, especially during the 12-day war, of helping to destroy some air defense systems as well as laser guide weapons in on them. To my knowledge, Israel was not flying aircraft in and over Iran. Israel wasn't flying that aircraft in and over Iran during the 12-day war. They were still using standoff. Well, those intelligence networks now, I think, have been completely compromised through what these Iranians discovered last year and then what they've done this time tracking with the Starlink terminals. So you start right there that they've got less intelligence capability on the ground. In fact, they're more blind now than they ever have been. But then also we've got the record of the United States with its carrier task force or carrier strike group in the Red Sea last March, and now Operation Rough Rider. So in that operation, the Navy was given the specific task of establishing freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. That meant a ship could sail wherever it wanted to go without being harassed or sunk or attacked, and to degrade the offensive capability of the Houthis, as well as to degrade their relationship and support from Iran. Those were the three missions. And to do that, at one point, there was one aircraft carrier arrived and then a second one. So you had two aircraft carriers, and each of them they had 5 destroyers, 4 destroyers and a cruiser. And the purpose of those ships is they provide a defensive screen. They have air defense missiles, usually about 100 per boat, per ship. And they were to be fired at incoming Houthi missiles. Well, when we look at what we've got off the coast of Iran right now, we got one carrier, okay? So we got half of what we had in the Red Sea, and instead of, a total of 5 ships capable of air defense, we only have 3. And what makes it even a weaker situation is each of those, the 3 destroyers, instead of having a full complement of, like, say, 100 air defense missiles in these vertical launch system cells, and just imagine these are like tubes put together. They're in the deck of the ship. The missile goes in, and missile fires out. Well, instead of having a full complement of 100, they've got only half, 50 to 60. The rest are with Tomahawk cruise missiles. Now, you say, oh, well, they could fire those Tomahawk cruise missiles with GPS. My understanding, though, is those ships are staying 1,000 miles off the coast of Iran because Iran has drones and anti-ship missiles that can travel more than 1,000 miles. And what's the range of a Tomahawk? 1,000 miles. So if they fire them off it's going to barely reach the beaches. It's not like it can travel anywhere at once in Iran. So when you're stepping back and looking at this militarily, you got to say, based upon the situation in the Red Sea, where the United States had every military advantage over the Houthis. Houthis didn't have an air force. Houthis had a limited missile supply. They didn't have an air defense system at all. And yet we failed. We completely failed to stop them from interfering with ships that they wanted to attack. And so now we're going up against Iran, who has a modern air force. They have modern air defense systems that have been supplemented by Russia and China. They have an incredible array of ballistic missiles and cruise missiles that are buried underground cities that are well protected. They can't be destroyed from just a Tomahawk cruise missile, as an example. And so we're going to get into that fight. And like I said, I share your puzzlement. What the hell are they thinking?
What are the thoughts, though, on the Israeli sides? I'm not sure if you're following the Israeli media, but especially now that Netanyahu is set to visit Trump this week already.
Yeah.
But the Israelis, they suffered a lot of destruction last time. I heard by some that they're planning to sit this one out and only join in if Iran is on its back foot, and it will be, I guess, a low-cost military adventure. Well, hoping that America can do this on its own. Again, one never knows. But what is the impression you're getting from Israel? Is this fears that it has to be done now before Iran can build itself too strong, or is it are there concerns that Israel is also not ready for this war? It's I often, to the credit of the Israelis, I often find that their media is at least more honest about
Yeah,
their
yeah.
intentions than ours. But I was wondering how you see the Israeli view on this.
Well, the Israeli press is commenting that this is an urgent visit by Netanyahu. Now, I cannot rule out that this is not a visit to coordinate a military operation. And because the last time Netanyahu was just in D.C., so we're on the 9th, about 41 days ago, on December 29th, when Bibi was in meeting with Trump. And there they were coordinating on that color revolution that was launched on the 28th. And I think at that time, my understanding was it was anticipated to have the United States carry out an attack as the protests culminated in the effort to further destabilize and cause the collapse of the regime. Well, that plan didn't work out. Whatever the CIA and Mossad had promised, it didn't come to pass. So here's Bibi now for the second bite at the apple. Trump is under enormous pressure from the Zionist lobby, both from Israel and here in the United States. I mean, people like Sheldon Adelson's wife, Miriam Adelson, the donors. I wrote a piece at sonar21.com last night commenting on a recent article by Stephen Bryan. I know Stephen. I think he's a very decent person. He used to be the Undersecretary of Defense under Ronald Reagan back in 81 to 88. So, good Lord, 40 plus years ago. But he wrote a piece just trashing the talks that took place in Oman, just a blistering critique of Steve Witkoff and, calling for action, so that Trump's got to do something. So there is no support when I guess what I'm saying is when I see someone like Stephen Bryan adopt that position, he's not a Ben Gvir or a Smotrich. Those guys are crazy. They're fanatics. Stephen's not a fanatic. He's a Zionist, but he's usually does rational thought and analysis. He was all emotional. And if he's feeling that way, I guarantee you that same view is shared not just within the Jewish community, but within the Zionist community among Christians. And so with that kind of pressure coming to bear on Trump, the odds are he's going to cave. And what is so dangerous about it is we keep telling ourselves how great we are militarily. We're like the evil queen in Snow White, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And the mirror's going, oh, you're the best. Nobody better than you. And yet we can't step back and objectively look at, okay, how did we do in Afghanistan after 21 years? How did we do in the Red Sea against the Houthis after more than a year, Operation Prosperity Guardian, and then succeeded by Rough Rider? We failed. And so without recognizing that we've entered an era where the U.S. military, that as it exists institutionally, it was designed for a particular period of time when technology was different. It's now changed. We're witnessing something as fundamentally different as took place from, say, the Spanish-American War and then World War I. So in Spanish-American War, you got Teddy Roosevelt riding up the hill on his horse. Horse cavalry was still important. But somewhere in that next 20 years, with the advent of tanks and machine guns in particular, horses were no longer really relevant. I mean, they were a liability more than an asset. So now look at what we're doing with aircraft carriers. We spend years building them, $15 billion or more, and all of a sudden they can be taken out by a $500,000 hypersonic missile. That China has them, Russia has them, Iran reportedly has them. So all of a sudden you can't use that aircraft. And then just before coming on your show, I was reading an article sent to me by one of my Air Force buddies that they're now the U.S. Think about this. The U.S. Navy has now created a jet, a combat jet, and a trainer that they will not allow it to land on a carrier. Okay, so they're developing a new jet technology, but it's not going to be carrier based. So you're going. So why do we have aircraft carriers? Particularly now, like we're seeing in the case with Iran, we have to keep them so far offshore that the weapons that they have normally that could be used if they were, say, 100 miles offshore are now basically useless because the distance is so great. And so with the advent of drones, I mean, just from a technology standpoint, when you realize those destroyers that are supposed to provide the air defense screen, they got 100 missiles. Normally, if they got an attack coming in, they'll fire 2 of those missiles, sometimes more, but let's go with just at least 2 to take out the one target. That's 50. You get 50 shots. And so imagine that you're flooding an aircraft carrier or that destroyer with 300 drones. That can be done. And you can't shoot them all down, and then they can attack and cause damage. And once the destroyer is out, has fired all those missiles, it has to sail to another port to get reloaded by a crane. It's not a simple matter of just grabbing them off some other ship and stuffing them in the tube. So we've created this dysfunctional, highly technical, very advanced, and it's unworkable in a combat environment. And that's what these people aren't thinking through. And look at it with all of the advantages we had us then on paper. I mean, say, let's go to Afghanistan. We had tanks, we had artillery, we had fixed wing aircraft, we had rotary wing, helicopters, we had mortars, we had overhead imagery. We're fighting a bunch of guys who are carrying rifles, basically. They got some mortars, they got some heavy machine guns, but they're not anywhere well equipped like we are. And we couldn't beat them after 21 years. We had to withdraw because we could not win that insurgency. So that's what I said. It's one thing to have the most expensive military in the world, but the capabilities, can it actually defeat an enemy or someone you've labeled as an enemy and then control the situation? And it's not just the United States. I mean, it's happened to Israel. Think of it from, here's Israel with a 300,000 man army. They have surrounded an area that's 5 miles wide and 25 miles long. They're fighting against a force that, again, is armed with sidearms and rifles. They're not armed with tanks and artillery and heavy equipment. And with all of that advantage that Israel has, because it's got them completely surrounded, I mean, it's not like they've got an easy way to resupply themselves. And yet Israel was unable, and still has been unable, to defeat Hamas and take actual control of the territory, which means you can walk the streets. You don't have to worry about getting ambushed. So that's where we got to get away from this Hollywood mentality of military prowess and recognize there are always limits to military power, which, as Clausewitz talked about, the military force is just one part of the politics of it. You've got to deal with the actual politics. So, and that's where I think the United States falls short. We refuse to deal with the actual politics of this. Instead, we indulge these fantasies.
Yeah. Well, just as a last question, that is, well, how do you see the other countries in the region reacting? Because as Iran has said, this would likely be a regional war. That is, they would strike at least the U.S. bases of the region, but they would also consider countries who join in on this to be, well, they should be held accountable. That is
Yeah, well,
launching or refueling from their territory. I know Saudi Arabia said that, we're not going to permit it, just to make sure that they wouldn't be struck. Again, you don't know if they're actually going to follow through on this. But how do you see the rest of the region possibly joining in? And, before you mentioned Yerevan, or, you can also put Baku on that list. To what
yes,
extent
yeah.
do you think the US could come down from the north? Because, Tehran is all the way up there in the Caspian Sea. It wouldn't surprise me if there would be some efforts of using, yeah, as at least Azerbaijan as a launching pad now that, Trump has brought peace to that region.
Yeah, no, in fact, I think that's how this war will spread. I fully anticipate that Armenia and Azerbaijan will be used as launching pads for attacks against Iran. Uh, Iran has held discussions with the Azeris, but this wouldn't be the first time that a government betrayed another government. Um, but I think also Iran has contingency plans in place to take out the military targets in those. They're not big countries, so that's one advantage that Iran has. The other is Russia as well is providing intelligence support to Iran with respect to Armenia and Azerbaijan, because Putin and his government, they're not real happy with either of those two, because they recognize that the United States has embarked on a plan of subversion to turn those countries so that they can be used as springboards to attack Russia. So you're right that I think Saudi Arabia, Qatar, they're going to choose to sit this one out if they can. Iraq has already basically declared itself fully aligned and supporting Iran, which, what a remarkable accomplishment, because we go back, 40 years, and Iran and Iraq were enemies, killing each other. And again, they were doing so at the behest of the United States. And most people today don't recall that at least through the first 8 years of the, 1980 to 1988, one of the biggest supporters of the Islamic Republic of Iran and helping them acquire weapons was Israel. So it was only after Saddam, went off the rails and was no longer considered a threat that Israel turned its attention and said, "Oh, we've got to now be worried about Iran as a potential nuclear threat." So, we always like to portray these things as the very simple black and white. We know who the good guys are, we know who the bad guys are. No, it's a far more complex, nuanced situation, and unfortunately, the West has no clue about it. Absolutely no clue. We go with the cartoon version, the evil ayatollahs killing innocent children, while America the Beautiful is running around planting trees and opening flower shops. Couldn't be further from the truth.
Well, just yeah, as a final thought, that was something I mentioned at debate you referenced before as well. That is when the Chinese came in and began to seek to improve relations between Saudi Arabia, the other Gulf states, and Iran. What you heard from the former head of Mossad was, hey, listen, if the whole anti-Iranian coalition is going to fall apart, we should also explore our opportunity or possibility of making peace with Iran. We don't share a common border. We don't really have that many interests that has to be in collision. At least maybe it's time to start talking about how we can negotiate, what core interests of theirs we have to respect, what core interests of us they have to respect. At least start to talk. I mean, it baffles me that there's no efforts at all to at least explore the opportunity. I mean, I don't see why Iran would have to be this, diehard enemy. I think, as you said, this idea that it just runs in their blood, that they want to destroy America. I'm not sure where this comes from. I think, if anything, there's been efforts over the years which proves that at least the Iranians looked towards the possibility or hoped that they could improve relations with the United States. And again, no country on the planet in its right mind wants to have a confrontational relationship with the US, which has the biggest army. So this is no, it's absurd to see how far this has gone.
Yeah,
The final thoughts before we wrap up.
Yeah, this Iran and Israel once had good relations, and they can have good relations again, and that was under the Ayatollah Khomeini. So it's well within this the scope. Part of this, though, goes to because Iran has been willing to support the Shia populations in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Israel, that for that reason, Israel wants to destroy Iran. And, that until the Zionist element is reined in, until they get to the point that they no longer believe that they are entitled by a deity. They claim that this deity has given them this specific land and given them permission to kill the people who are already there. I mean, that's, it's a racist mentality, but you can't ignore it. It's real because people act on those beliefs. And when you feel like you're entitled, you can do whatever you want to these Palestinians and to Shia. That's not going to get resolved easily. But the thing we have to remember about Iran is since the Ayatollah took over, the Khomeini took over in '79, Iran hasn't been going out with sending military adventurers out to attack other countries. They did provide military support to Bashar al-Assad against an Islamic insurgency that the U.S. actually was supporting. I mean, there's the other. We were supporting the very people who attacked us on 9/11. It doesn't make sense.
Well, Larry, thank you as always for taking the time. I know you're in high demand, and as always, I will leave a link to Sonar 21 in the description, and I highly recommend for all the listeners to check out your articles there. As well, at least that's what I do. So thank you again.
Well, thank you for what you do because your program provides really a wide variety of information that if people just take time to watch, they'll be better informed, much better than mainstream media. I'll say that.
Doesn't take much these days, sadly. So, thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.